Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing.
Welcome, everybody, to Morning Magazine for this August 19th, 2020. Your host, James J. Malouf here. In part two, we're going to speak with General Manager of your Wisconsin Rapids Rafters, Andy Francis. Right now, though, we have our good friend Shane Blaser, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor, in with us. Good morning, Shane.
Good morning, James.
And we have our friends over at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. And good morning to Kev and everybody over there. We appreciate the gang there. Mayor, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Good. We're going to talk rafters when we wrap up our interview here. We will have some fun, but we did have a couple of things we wanted to touch on right away. And you had a city council meeting yesterday.
Correct. We did have a city council meeting, and there's discussion starting to happen on Facebook and in the public about the decision that the council made to store rail cars for ERCO in some of our rail space out in our East Side Industrial Park. And so I guess I want to take this opportunity to maybe try to fill in some information on what's going to be stored out there and if there's potential concerns and those type of things.
Yeah. So as far as feedback that you've gotten on this situation, what is some of the concerns that you've heard?
Well, I think a bulk of the concerns seem to be stemming around what's going to be stored out there, and so what's going to be stored out there is hydrochloric acid. It is corrosive. It's non-flammable. There's concerns because we have a fertilizer plant out there, and the two together will not be explosive. It does not cause an explosion. There's not a requirement that this be housed behind fencing and barbed wire. The tank rail cars, how they're constructed is that they're a fully enclosed tank. There's not valves. They're all top loaded and unloaded. So there's less concern and chance for leak. I just think that, city staff and people have done their due diligence to talk with Canadian National Rail Safety people, our hazardous materials through our fire department, the team, and trying to make sure and alleviate that we are not basically what I've been told is selling out safety for money. And I don't believe that. And I'm hoping that the community would realize that we're not looking to jeopardize or put anybody at a safety risk here. Yeah,
it doesn't do you any good to do something like that. Again, you are not when it comes to our local mayors in smaller towns and rural cities, and that it isn't as though that where you're living in the mayor's mansion or something like that, way out of town and all that. I mean, you're a citizen as well. You're going to be affected by anything negative that you brought in. So it really doesn't benefit you either as a citizen. And so that part of it certainly makes a lot of sense there. I think a lot of us immediately, when you said that, went back to like ninth grade science as well. Like, what happens when you put those two together there? And if you did, do well in ninth grade science, that those two combinations aren't going to be flammable or anything.
Right. It is a product that we do use in our high school sciences, in our junior high school science, and it's used in the food industry, and so it has a lot of uses. And we had an opportunity to partner with a great local company that has a long safety record and a great community partner involved in our communities. And this product is already being stored on tracks in the area, so it's not something new. Yeah. It's just an opportunity that was presented to the city, and we were able to take advantage of that because it would have gone somewhere else.
Well, and being blunt about it, this city needs what income we can get right now. Not certainly that we're in a desperate situation where we're going to put our citizens in any harm or anything like that, but we have to take moves where we can. I can remember some years back when people really wanted, we got to bring more businesses in. We got to bring more businesses in. And then as soon as a business would, be tempted to come in or talk about coming in, well, we don't want that smell or we don't want this. Most factories, most businesses are going to bring a good and a bad with them. I can't think of one industry that's going to come into your area and it's nothing but positivity. So you kind of have to balance these things.
Correct. And you're right. There's very few opportunities for municipalities to have a revenue source other than taxes. And this is a great partnership that has a financial benefit. And it's not long-term, but if it could be long-term and we could find to be able to store rail cars there and make some revenue, as long as it's done safely and responsibly. I think it would be prudent for our council to support that.
Talking with people who voted for you and talking with you a bit off air early on, one of the things that I know that we were brought in for too is to balance the books, is to get things as right as possible and everything. So this is part of what your MO is. This is part of what we are asking from you.
Yeah, and I said this last night, and we have $28 million worth of debt. We have projects next year that's going to require some borrowing if we want to continue to do street maintenance and other projects. And so there's very few opportunities for a revenue source.
And we have to take where we can. Again, not in a desperate situation, but certainly when it checks all the things that we're looking for, got to go with it. Nobody is going to bring anything into the area that is going to risk safety, especially during a pandemic. I mean, I think that if we trusted you guys and the board enough to vote you in, we got to trust those situations.
Yeah, and then in turn, then we need to trust the people that are in charge of the safety end of it, whether it be through the rail or through ERCO or through our own hazardous team in our fire department. I'm going to rely on their expertise and their concerns. Now, if they would say this is probably not a good thing and we're concerned about it, then I would hope that the council would have taken a different direction. But that wasn't the case.
And as far as the council, was there anything else discussed last night?
That was
that was pretty much the main.
That was the main focus. We did discuss a little bit about the pool, and I plan on creating a work group after the season closes, and then we're going to start to discuss what we've learned and what we can change in procedures and those type of things, and address some of the concerns, whether it be through the cost of ticket sales and the pricing structure for next year and those type of things. So we're gonna put together a work group to do that.
And I understand you guys met for a little while ago and talked about the Labor Day fireworks and that situation and how you're going to handle that.
Yeah, that was a tough decision. I'm a big fan of the ability for people to gather and celebrate our 4th of July and our independence. And it did come down to, I unfortunately or fortunately had to break the tie. And I weighed, it was not an easy decision. And I weighed, are we losing any freedoms, or are we restricting our residents? And I didn't feel we were. It's an event, as many other events have been canceled and will be canceled until we get to a point where the community and the country is comfortable in going forward. And so I ended up breaking the tie to cancel the fireworks. I did try to find out if there was a place we could maybe do a drive-up fireworks, and it just wasn't able to be put together that quickly. And so that decision ultimately was to cancel that event.
I appreciate that I can hear it in your voice that this was not an easy thing for you to do, that you were thinking about what was best for the citizens, not so much even yourself or anything like that, but thinking in a bigger picture. And that's what we ask of our politicians. I always admire that. Even if I agree or disagree with a decision, I appreciate that you look at it from that perspective and come to it from that way.
Yeah, and it was controversial, and there's people on both sides, and I'd gotten calls to cancel it, and I got calls that we need to keep it, and ultimately it was just the right thing to do at that time.
One of the biggest things I've learned in doing this job, especially in the year or so I've been doing this morning magazine, is there is no topic that is not controversial anymore. There's nothing we could say or do that you're not going to get 50-50 on. You're going to
Absolutely.
I could say Babe Ruth is the best baseball player of all time, and I'm going to get a ton of people tell me that he isn't. A ton of them that will.
Yep.
You can't please everybody.
Nope, and you just try to make the best decision, and hopefully next time it will go the other way for the other group, and it's just kind of the way it is.
So then why get into politics? No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, sometimes I wonder that. Like, what are you guys thinking? I get it. It's bigger than you, and certainly a call to serve, a call to help your community and that kind of thing certainly is a big part of it. I'm not making light of that, but sometimes, man.
I was on the phone with a gentleman before I came here. You just, I don't know, you do wonder, but you get into it because you do want to make things better, hopefully, and better for the community. Personally, I'm not looking for anything personally. I just want the community to be better. I grew up here. I remember what it was like, and it's not going to be like that again. But you just want to hopefully leave it better than when it started and go forward. That's the hope.
It's a little like how we are with our kids. I don't know a good parent out there who doesn't want their kids to have a better life and be better than them. And it's similar to that, where you're trying to leave things better than when you came in, or just make things better where you can.
Yeah.
And we all have specialties and things that we can do to be able to do that, especially when it comes to certain positions.
Absolutely.
We have some fun news to tell people about, too. You guys just announced the opening of some tennis and pickleball courts?
Yes, the long-awaited tennis courts and pickleball courts over at Witter Field are now open. It took a while because I did learn that apparently asphalt, as it cures, it does not adhere paint very well, so you have to wait for it to cure, and then it can be painted. So they are open, and they are looking forward to, I'm sure, getting used, and we're looking forward to seeing people take advantage of the new courts.
The WRRC how has that been going overall from your perspective?
It's definitely been a learning experience. I think talking to people, there's so much to do around that complex without going into the aquatic park itself. With the splash pad and the great playground there, there's a pavilion with picnic tables for people to enjoy a picnic and enjoy the facility at no cost. And then obviously there's the aquatics park, and this winter there'll be ice skating and lowboard hockey, and so there's quite a bit to do there.
Went to a Raptors game last weekend, and before I got there a little early, so I went and took a walk around there and everything, and it's such a nice area. And as a kid going to East over there in that area, I always liked that spot of this town, and it's nice to see some energy being put in there and some youth and some just there's a good vibe there with that and the rafters and all of that going on.
Yeah, I went to East also. Yeah, and you go to gym class over there, or you go to the football and the track, and now there's definitely a new revitalized use of the area, and it is nice to see.
When it comes to, because I know that there was some talk before about having residents from outside of the limits coming in and that kind of thing, and Wisconsin Rapids residents not being able to use it and everything. I haven't heard as much noise about that in the last couple of weeks. That kind of evening out?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what specifically caused, but we did not hit capacity much after a point, and so people have been able to get in there and not have to be worried about having to wait in lines and those type of things. And it, this Sunday is the last day that's going to be there, so hopefully people can get an opportunity to enjoy it. And there's been some controversy and some discussion about why is it closing this Sunday, and ultimately it came down to staffing. A lot of college kids are going back to school. We hired everybody that applied during the application period, so it wasn't like we didn't try to staff it more. Adult staff would be great because it would help cover some of that time, because it would be nice to go a little bit later in the season, at least through the holiday weekend.
I'm going to go somewhere with this, but I just a broad question for you in general, where in the position you're in right now, and you've been doing it, how long have you been? About 3 months, is it, or 2 months?
110 days.
Yeah, somewhere around there
days,
and everything. Well, first up, I got to ask, how many train questions have you gotten? Because I can't imagine.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I think that if somebody could solve the train, they'd be a hero forever, and we would name streets after them, and we'd have libraries and schools named, because if we could resolve the train issue in this community, you'd go down in the history books, because it is a contentious issue for every one of us. We've all been stuck behind a train, and we've all been stuck behind a train at the most inconvenient time as we're trying to get somewhere, or people are trying to get back to work after a break or a lunchtime. And trains are definitely a central discussion point around here. And I've got people that come in and they'll give me plans on like how we can do. A gentleman came in with a drawing of how we can add a roundabout, and it's raised over the tracks. And everybody's.
I've seen some pretty interesting ones. Yeah,
exactly. And a solution to that would be a huge win for Wisconsin Rapids.
When it comes to a situation with the aquatic park like that, and having to, I shouldn't say having to close early, but deciding to close then because of like the situation you said there, and then you have a lot of people kind of complaining to you that, well, why is it closing early? Well, these are the reasons. I think of the illegal immigrant situation where we certainly, it's not something that you can have, and at the same time, when you get rid of that, there's a workforce that's missing. In Alabama, there was a very big thing some years ago where we're going to get rid of all illegal immigrant workers. And then all of a sudden, nobody wanted to farm their harvest their watermelons. And that industry died almost like within a month or so. So if you really want something to happen, you have to put energy into it. You have to put your own community into it. If you guys want this to be open longer, we've got to have people that can work it. It's just no different than if, well, I want the roads to be better. Well, you're going to have to pay some taxes to do that. Well, I don't want to pay taxes. You can't have it both ways. You've got to pick a lane here. You've got to make a decision.
Yeah, and so anybody interested next year in working at the aquatic center, the YMCA offers a lifeguarding course. We once winter had opened or we had gotten the park open, we offered a lifeguarding course there, and then we also offered the water park certification course. And so those are something that people can prepare. Should they have an interest, they can go to the Y, take the certification there, or wait till spring. And we're going to be looking at hiring additional staffing next year to accommodate the greater numbers there.
That's where I wanted to go with it, because we, this year is taken care of, but we can look ahead to next year and how we can hopefully, not so much improve, but just we can always make things better, anything in life. So what we can do to kind of add to that, that's one of those things, is having that kind of angle on it when we go into next year, people thinking about that a little bit more.
And we'll have better procedures because, we close sometimes due to weather. We had a bodily function issue on Monday. We had to close, and they had to make sure the pool was right. But we'll have better procedures on when we're going to close. Should we need to close early, or we have incremental weather closure procedures. But if there's just lack of attendance, at what point, or those things we're going to, in this work group, that we're going to discuss and try to nail down a procedure so everybody knows going into it next year that they might be closed because of this reason. We should check.
Certainly it's the first year it's open, so there's going to be things that go as planned and plenty of things that don't, and
Correct.
things to learn from. So, okay, well, we can do this better next year. And then, with a pandemic going on, of course, that adds a whole other mix to the whole thing. Yeah. So I think anybody with some common sense can realize, okay, well, we've got to, take this year as it is and go into next year and then see how that goes.
Yeah, and the staff has worked. They've been amazing. Our park and rec staff and our staff over at the pool, the aquatic center, and the supervisors have been amazing. They have put in so many hours, and they've come in, and it definitely has not been easy because we've been learning on the fly some of this because it is brand new, and how they've handled themselves and carried themselves, and through some controversy from the public and maybe some unhappy patrons, but they've endured it all, and it's going to be hopefully next year a better experience for everybody.
Yeah. Speaking of the public, one of the couple of questions that I've heard from listeners over the last couple of weeks was asking about the Mayor's Youth Council that was in place. Is that going to continue?
Yep, absolutely. And actually, we're going to start recruiting for that. It's going to be new this year because it's going to be a lot of virtual recruiting. And then being that kids are only going to be school partial, a lot of it will be through Zoom. And then trying to figure out how we can offer an experience to the youth, but still trying to, getting together and doing tours and doing projects are going to be a challenge this year.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to work through that. But we are trying to make it maybe a little less formal as an organization, because they are youth, and we want this experience to be positive for them and give them. We've had discussions with them on kind of what they'd like to see going forward a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, things that us adults think might be interesting. The youth definitely has a different opinion and may not finding some of the tours at city facilities not quite as interesting as maybe an adult would. And
Found that out as a teacher quite often. Yesterday was Robert Redford's birthday, and I wanted to get into my students the chemistry between Newman and Redford and everything, and immediately look up and they're just like blank-eyed. They're like, "What? What do you do?" Okay, we'll move on.
Who are these people? Yeah,
we'll find out right away what's going to work and what isn't. But I got to say that is, to me, and I know a handful of listeners out there, the good news of the day to hear that that's going to continue, because not only is it important for all the things that you mentioned there, and certainly anything to give kids things to do and constructive and positive things, but one of the things that I've talked so much from day one meeting Sheriff Becker and talking off air and on air about is certainly getting that gap there better between the youth and our police forces, and making sure that when a kid is in trouble, they feel comfortable going to a police officer, and being transparent about all that yes, there is police brutality. Yes, there is these things, but with anything good, there is a lot of positive, and being able to have two thoughts in your head at once, basically, that you can see both sides. Right. And we forget about this, but there is a big gap between politics and citizens, and especially politics and the youth. And so many of our kids grow up with our parents yelling at the screen of a politician, this guy's doing this wrong, this guy's doing that, and that's all they hear. That's all they see is the negative side of politics. We're going to have politicians, from what I can tell, for the rest of America. So we should probably find a way to do this where, hey, there's some bad apples out there, but not every politician is a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And the Youth Council, to me, is one of those great ways of building that, of showing kids, hey, not everybody's a bad guy.
Right, and it also gives them just a better understanding of government and an ability to have input and an opportunity to connect with these people that they may not normally get to connect with and share some of their thoughts as a youth and from their perspective. Because as all of us growing up in this community, there is a disconnect. Every adult thinks they know what's best for the kid, and every kid doesn't think any adult knows anything. And so anytime you can bridge that gap and allow those conversations to happen, and Kevin's been involved in that the Youth Council with us quite a bit here, and has been instrumental in helping us. And I think it's very important that we all be able to connect like that and hopefully gain any better understanding and opportunity is a win for everybody.
Very well said. And a really good point that I didn't think about in there about kids learning more about politics. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of kids out there that don't know the 3 branches of government, right. Things like that. Exactly. I mean, so the more knowledge, the better they understand it, the better they are prepared to not only be voters, but even maybe run for office or something like that.
Yeah, and it's tough to get information because a lot of times the city council and staff are staff is bombarding city council members with information, and you try to make it. You try to be, I'm a big fan of transparency, but you try to make sure that. But it's hard for citizens to get all that same information, so they might see a decision being made, but not understand all the background information that made that decision. But on the surface, if you don't have that background information, it may look like a bad decision. And so it's really about trying to be transparent and get information out there, but how do you do that without inundating the public with all that information? And
I think it's on the public too to have some patience and so many times we want to go with our first instinct or our first feeling and get angry or get happy or something. You need to take a second and be like, well, wait a minute, before I get angry, why did they make this decision? Do a little homework, research a little bit.
Yeah, we may not agree with our politicians, but ultimately, my hope, or at least on a local level, that the people that are elected there give them a little trust and thinking that they don't want to do something as a detriment to the community. Because I think everybody on our council has hopes that our community could be more and not to drag it down. And so you got to try to trust a little bit. If you can, if you don't trust, then you need to ask and get an explanation of why a decision was made.
I feel like all I'm doing is metaphors in this interview, but it reminds me too of something growing up with my family. We're diehard Chicago Bear fans, but I know, and I apologize. Oh, the mayor left. But with that, when our team doesn't do well or go into the playoffs, which has been a lot in my life, we end up rooting for whoever else in the NFC North is. That's how we have always been. That's how we've always been. We root for our side. We root for our group here and everything. And I understand that, okay, your guy didn't get in that you voted for or anything, but that's still your Wisconsin Rapids mayor, or that's still your, such and such and everything. So that's your team, I mean, almost, I feel like you kind of not have to, but find some areas there where you can find some likeness, where you can find some positivity and everything, and build on that instead of just pointing fingers.
Yeah, and I like answering my own phone. A lot of people have called the office, and I'll answer the phone, and it's to people's surprise, but I want to engage in conversation. I want to hear other people's opinions, and we may not always agree, but at least we can agree that we want things to be different. Whether or not how we get to that point might be different, but I guess that's what I've been elected to do, is to be that representation for them, and that's what I plan on doing.
It's been a rough 100-some days for you, and I think that a lot of us feel for you on that, and appreciate the work that you're doing. But one certainly have had a number of positives. One of them is certainly Rafters baseball right now. I mean, has that been fun for you? Has that at least been one of the reliefs for you?
Well, I unfortunately haven't had an opportunity to partake in that, but I do have conversations with the owners and stay in contact with them, and I'm very glad that we do have baseball, and I'm equally as glad as seeing Ethan Peters and Donovan Brandel be able to get called up. A couple of local boys to pitch over there, and
it's pretty cool.
In my previous business, I've watched both of them and grow through high school and pitching, and it's really neat to see them to be able to be out on the mound out there. And
it was exciting to me, and I know a lot of listeners out there, especially if you have a personal tie there. That's got to be even more. That's cool.
It's great when our local boys can. Young men can get on the field and play at that level with the Rafters.
If people have follow-up questions, if they want to reach you, Mary, like you said, you're good about answering your phone and all that. How can they contact you?
715-421-8202 is my direct line.
Always appreciate the time, Shane. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us.
Thank you, James.
Big thank you to Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Shane Blaser for joining us, and a big thank you to Kevin and all of our friends over at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. We appreciate you guys. We will be back with Morning Magazine Part 2. General Manager Andy Francis from Your Rafters is going to join us on Morning Magazine, AM 1320, WFHR.